Service Committee interim response to homelessness, and a closed matter related to labor relations. I will now ask Will Short, Regional Clerk, to do the roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Rabanovic.
Here.
Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Clark.
Here.
Councillor Lorentz.
Here.
Councillor Jowett.
Here.
Councillor Erb.
Here.
Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor McGarry.
Well, she's trying to get on. Can we send her the link, please?
We just did. Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Harris.
Here.
Councillor Shantz.
Here.
Councillor Strickland.
Here.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Galloway.
Here.
And we had regrets from Councillor Kiefer.
I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather virtually today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. What I have learned from First Nations people is that our relationship with the land should be one of stewardship, not ownership, and I'm honored to make this journey with them. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act?
Sorry.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. I do want to declare a conflict under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, as I have a family member that owns property in the proximity of the Ottawa Street corridor, so I would ask that you deal with that piece of the ROP separately, as we did at committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no other declarations. Colleagues, we have a number of delegations tonight that wish to speak regarding the interim housing report, but this meeting was originally called to address the regional official plan, so I'm going to pull that item up as our first agenda item. You have received a council information package electronically of correspondence related to the regional official plan, and it was distributed earlier. These items will be received for information unless anyone has something they want to bring forward. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to go into the Committee of the Whole to consider reports. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Lorentz. Please use your icons to vote. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you. So Council is now in Committee of the Whole. First up is a committee reports, the Planning and Works Committee Summary, Regional Official Plan Amendment, August 11th, 2022. I'd ask for a mover, Councillor Galloway, and a seconder, Councillor Clark. All those in, please use your icons to vote.
I have questions of staff.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Sorry, I have questions of staff, if I may, please.
We are confirming an earlier committee report.
Okay, but there's still, I mean, there was all sorts of delegations we heard from last time, and we hadn't, staff was going away and considering it, and we were as well. So this is our only opportunity to consider that, is it not?
Okay, go ahead and ask your question of staff.
Thanks. So my first question of staff has to do with the, actually this past week when we were at AMO. And during that time, there was a release of a report by the Smart Property Institute that identified the 1.5 million homes that the province is looking to see built within 10 years and how that's allocated across the province. I referenced that at committee, that report would be coming out last week. And I'm wondering if staff have had an opportunity to look at that and look at the allocation that's suggested for Waterloo region. And how does our ROP document, as we're considering today, connect with and relate to that report?
Mr. Regier.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Redmond. Yeah, thank you for the question. It was an interesting piece of work. The report identified the need for approximately 70,000 new homes in the Waterloo region as part of that larger inventory. There was quite a bit of discussion internally or inside the report about the nature of the assessment, but its conclusion was if 1.5 million homes was the right answer, approximately 70,000 of those needed to be built inside the Waterloo region. That represents about 13,000 more units than are contemplated by our through our analysis, but we are currently building about 6,000 homes a year. This would require an increase by about 1,000 or about 18% over what the current industry standard is on an annual basis. Certainly, if the industry is capable of gearing up to that level of production, then there's no good reason why that number of homes can't be built in the Waterloo region. We're building about 6,000 homes a year right now. Approximately 30% of those are being built inside of or in the greenfield areas. About 69% of them are being built inside the existing urban area, built-up area, as it's known in the ROP. So if those ratios continue, and we have no reason to doubt that they will, then certainly there's ample room. We have approximately 35,000 lots inside of existing approved, pending, or draft approved plans of subdivision in the Waterloo region. There's no doubt that we have the land available to hold that many homes should the industry be ready to gear up and produce an extra approximately 1,000 a year over the next 10 years.
But will we have the land supply that's necessary?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. The next question I have had to do with correspondence from Ms. Dawn Parker, and it in particular related to staff responses to queries pertaining to the MTSA designation over the last 2 years, and concerned that they weren't they weren't as complete as the citizen delegation would have liked it. I know that part of the concern goes on to read, and this was shared with all members of council, that there was a desire to focus on more low-rise residential neighborhoods, particularly in the 500 to 800 meter walking distance from the station stops. I'm wondering if you've given further consideration to the correspondence that was shared with council and staff, and what staff's response would be to Ms. Parker.
Yeah. Through you, Chair Redmond. Yeah, we've had extensive conversation with city staff and with the community about the MTSA boundaries and policies inside of the boundaries. The general approach has been if the there is some variability between the 500 and 800 meter pedestrian radius around the center around the station. And the approach that we've taken is that basically everything within the 500 meter radius is included in the station area. Looking out to the 800 meter radius, we tend to include primarily large parcels that are suitable for redevelopment. So outside of that 500 meter radius, we'll see primarily large parcels of low density commercial or vacant parking lots, that sort of thing, that are suitable for reurbanization. There will be significant opportunity for discussion with area municipalities about the specific planning policies that will apply to those MTSAs. And so there's a lot of conversation about the specific design approach that municipal planning will take to the redevelopment over time.
Okay, thank
Councillor
you.
Ravanovich, you have another question?
Yeah, I do. The next question I have has to do with the Chamber of Commerce. As we know, they wrote a letter that committee considered or received just prior to committee time last time. They indicated that they would have liked to have had an opportunity to delegate today, but were informed that they couldn't. I'm wondering if staff can respond to the concerns in that letter. And then I have one more question in addition to that.
Mr. Regier?
Yeah, through you, Chair Redmond. Yes, we've drafted a response. I don't have the response directly in front. I'll just, maybe I do here, actually. We've drafted a response to the chamber letter. There wasn't any new information in the letter except I guess a continued statement that they feel that there's a need for greater low-density housing, so we don't disagree with the need to and the desire to bring on more supply more quickly in the Waterloo region. We're taking steps as a region to and as a group of area municipalities to do that. And we certainly look forward to working with industry to accelerate and the development process and monitor the assumptions in our planning models moving forward.
And the last question I have, or I guess correction that perhaps needs to be made. I know during the delegations last time we heard that there was some of the delegations who were expressing continued frustration around the land needs assessment, and there's obviously a debate between regional staff and some in the community around did we do it properly or not. And one of the arguments from staff was that, in fact, the data that was used by the delegations was never shared with the region. It's my understanding, in fact, that they have since communicated with us and informed us that it was shared. And so I'm just wondering if we can get that clarity from regional staff.
So just to clarify your comment, it was shared with regional staff when you say it was shared with us?
Sorry?
That's your understanding that the information from the...
From the delegation, staff indicated that the delegation never shared their calculations around the LNA. And so they were never able to evaluate them. The delegation has said, in fact, that they have shared that data. And so I'm wondering if we can get staff to comment on that.
Mr. Regier?
Yeah, through you, Chair Redmond. Yes, certainly we received the same comment. I think what I'd say is that each of the pieces of analysis that we received had very significant gaps in it. In some cases, we didn't receive some of the data and the underlying assumptions. In other cases, there were significant shortcomings that would have been required, that are actually required by the provincial methodology that simply weren't provided for in the reports that we received. And that's not surprising because frankly the provincial methodology is extensive and we're obliged to complete analysis down to the area municipal level. That was generally not done, and by the private land needs assessments. So there were gaps. You couldn't call them to complete land needs assessments. They simply weren't complete in their as per the requirements of provincial methodology. But having said that, I mean, we're certainly we'll still continue the conversation with the planning teams that presented their work and seek ongoing clarification. We've made a number of requests for those assumptions and for the data and detailed analysis that supports their work. And and we'll keep on working with them to clarify our shared understanding of the land needs for the region over the next 30 years.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions, and I'll have some comments to make at the appropriate time, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to call the vote. It's been moved and seconded, and we're going to take part.
Are we not doing comments?
Not now. We're doing them after the vote.
After the vote.
Yes. So it's been moved and seconded. The first part of the motion is the one I will take separately, and it is on the Regional Municipality of Waterloo take the following actions respect to the proposed recommended amendment to the Regional Official Plan as outlined in the report dated August 11th, 2022. And A is the Regional Intensification Corridor be included in the proposed ROP amendment along Ottawa Street as reflected in schedules and policies of the proposed ROP amendment outlined in Attachment A. So I would ask you to use your icons to vote. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you. And the second point is the Regional Municipality of Waterloo take the following actions with respect to the proposed recommended amendment to the Regional Official Plan as outlined in the same report. And there's B, C, D, and E sections, which I won't read because you should all have them before you. So again, I would ask you to use your icons to vote.
Madam Chair, I wonder if we could have a recorded vote on this one.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Rentz. There's been a request for a recorded vote. I'll turn to the clerk.
Chair Redmond,
In favor.
Councillor Verbanovic,
In favor.
Councillor Jaworski,
In favor.
Councillor Clark,
In favor.
Councillor Lorentz,
In favor.
Councillor Jowett,
In favor.
Councillor Erb,
Favor.
Councillor Nowak,
Favor.
Councillor McGarry,
In favor.
Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Harris,
Opposed.
Councillor Shantz,
In favor.
Councillor Strickland,
In favor.
Councillor Foxton,
In favor.
and Councillor Galloway.
In favor.
Carried.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm now going to turn to Councillor Galloway to make a few comments.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the opportunity as Chair of Planning and Works to speak first on this particular matter. The region of Waterloo is renowned for being innovative and bold when it comes to its planning policies, and I think that's a reputation that we should be very, very proud of. And it goes back quite a number of years. Maybe even before my time. But in my time, certainly the regional growth management strategy was a groundbreaking document that was highly complemented by the province and by the planning community generally. It set up the countryside line as one of its primary cornerstone policies, as well as rapid transit. The rapid transit, of course, grew into the ION project a number of years later. So that was January 25th of 2003 when we passed the regional growth management strategy. And since that time, we've continued on our way in terms of some groundbreaking and innovative planning policies, including the environmentally sensitive landscapes, again, made in Waterloo region policy. Other ROP amendments, and ROP reviews that we've done along the way, and then we come to what's in front of us today, which again is bold and transformative and innovative, particularly speaking to one of our top strategic objectives of dealing with climate action and those kinds of environmental issues. regional official plans and the reviews of those plans are, by their nature, there are competing interests. Obviously, the competing interests between landowners, between even municipalities to some extent within our family of municipalities. And finding that balance is always a difficult task. And at the end of the day, if not everybody is perfectly happy, then that's probably a good result, about as best as you're going to do. But I think that we can be quite satisfied, at least I'm speaking for myself, I'm quite satisfied with the outcome. And I believe this is another one of those watershed type planning policies that we're putting into place alongside some of our other innovative and groundbreaking policies that I mentioned earlier. These processes, of course, are never perfect. And sometimes when people don't agree with some of the elements of the outcomes, then of course the process is to blame, and we hear that on a regular basis. And you know, no process is absolutely perfect. But I do want to take the opportunity to thank the community, all the various stakeholders, all the various groups, members of our community, just at large individuals who took a considerable interest in this. Our engagement process on this particular project was extensive. The numbers of people who engaged in surveys and in meetings online particularly is really significant. The number of meetings that staff have held, a number in the hundreds, with individuals or with groups or with council or committee. There's been a tremendous amount of opportunity for people to have input into the process. So I want to thank the community and the stakeholders and the citizens at large who took an interest and provided some direction to staff and to council. But I particularly want to thank staff and our consulting team, staff from the most senior levels right through to everyone in the planning department and other departments that were involved in this process. It's really an all hands on deck engagement for staff, and it's gone on for a few years. Today is the culmination of a few years of very hard slogging and work. And at times, you know, things were, you know, somewhat divisive or acrimonious with certain people. And that's unfortunate because everybody is really working towards a plan or amendment to the plan that moves our community forward in a very positive way to deal with the challenges that we have, both in terms of growth, which of course we have been told to plan for by the province, but also in terms of sustainability and climate action and so on. So when we look at things such as the 15-minute neighborhood and 15-minute community, some of the other policies that deal with trying to mitigate some of the transportation challenges that we have. It doesn't always, it's not always met with unanimity, and staff have dealt with that, I think, very, very well. And I want to thank staff, Mr. Regier and Danielle and Brenna and John and a whole bunch of others who have put their heart and soul into this effort over the last few years. And I think we have a very good plan. The process that the province prescribes doesn't necessarily end here today. It ends here today for council, and and then we'll have to see what the provincial process itself, as it goes to the minister and beyond, what that actually ends up looking like, although we can hope that it'll end up with an approval, a swift and appropriate approval for this particular plan. So Madam Chair, I'm very pleased to have moved this particular recommendation and been part of the process, and look forward possibly from the sidelines in the future to see how all this is implemented as we go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. And I would just say hear, and second everything you said, but I also do want to shine a spotlight on the chairing that you have done through a very difficult and long process. You've been fair, respectful, and even-handed, and I think the meetings have reflected that, so thank you for your leadership. I'm going to go to Councillor Clark, who seconded the motion, and then I believe Councillor Vrbanovich wanted to make comments too. So Councillor Clark, go ahead.
No, sorry, I want to speak to another item on the agenda. I'm good with everything that Councillor Galloway said.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vrbanovich.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll decline at this point. Normally, comments are made ahead of debate, so I'll pass, and I think the minutes from the Planning Committee will reflect the comments that I had to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make comments at this point in time? Councillor Erb, please go ahead.
Thank you. Trying to get my mouse to unmute. So I wasn't able to fully participate in last week's committee meeting. I did manage to vote in what I consider one of the most consequential votes for this past term of council that will affect the future of the region for many years. And so I appreciate the opportunity just to make a few comments. And first I want to, as like many other council members, express my appreciation to staff for the tremendous amount of work they did collectively as a team in developing this plan. I'm sure it felt like a marathon, almost 2 years, and today you're getting close to the finish line. The timeline provided by the region presented many challenges that needed to be weighed, and with giving adequate time for input and participation from the public, the area, and the area municipalities. And I think it was a delicate balancing act, which you maneuvered to the best of your ability. And in the end, hopefully everyone felt heard and included in the process. And it was obvious to me, and I think to many others, that regardless of how long we have for the input, some would want to have more time to have their views included in the report. However, the final outcome of the recommendations probably would not change regardless of how much more time we had. I think what was approved last week and confirmed today is a good balance for preserving the significant urban-rural mix of our region, which is something that is integral to why we thrive as a region and why we are having and will have significant growth in the years ahead, both for housing and employment opportunities. At the beginning of the process, there was a desire to have, by some, to have zero loss of land for food production. But after some lengthy conversations and the recognition that there has to be some give and take, an acceptable number was reached. There were clearly competing interests related to the amount of land for employment and residential development. And while these interests came from different ends of the spectrum, my naive hope is that at the end of the process, all parties have the best interests of the region at heart while rightly defending their own interests. And I like to see this amendment as a win-win for the region, and we achieved through a balanced approach with this outcome that we have the 15-minute neighborhoods, the countryside line did not change. Staff are confident we have sufficient land for both employment and residential growth in the future. And if by chance their forecast assumptions may be not realistic by the time of the next review, we have the opportunity to make some adjustments. And to me, it makes sense that rather than giving too much now, when we can't take it away later, it makes sense to accept what staff have recommended and deal with any changes that might be required in the next review. So thanks to all of the individuals, the community groups, the business sector from the region who enthusiastically participated in the review. And again, special thanks to staff who led this conversation, I think, with patience, with professionalism, some listening skills, and I think a determination to achieve a balance for the growth of our region that will be sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. Any other colleague want to make a comment? Thank you very much, and I would express on behalf of Council our thanks, Mr. Regier, to you, your staff, and also to all the area municipalities who, from CAOs to planning staff, and everyone involved. And, you know, we had economic development and business interests on all levels of every municipality in vigorous collaboration and debate, and I think we've come out with a product that we can rightfully be proud of, acknowledging that there is a way ahead and it may be modified and reformed as we go forward. So thank you very much. Colleagues, the next agenda item is a response to comments and questions raised during the Planning and Works Committee. That has been received for information, and if you have any questions to any of those responses, staff are here to answer them. Seeing none, we're going to proceed to delegations. But before we move to Community Services Committee summary, I'd like to remind all delegations of some of the guidelines for participation. Please leave your video, camera turned off, and your microphone audio muted until you're called on to speak. Today's delegations will be allotted 5 minutes to speak. Groups of 2 or more will be allocated 10 minutes. Any delegations who registered before the deadline, after the deadline, will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. These time allotments are in line with our pilot project that has been undertaken since 2021, and we will continue to be following them this evening. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed, and you are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting: interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations; derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others; turning on your camera at an inappropriate time; and any hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations: please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and the ideas shared with us from our community. So the first delegation registered is Meagan, Snyder, Unsheltered Campaign. Welcome, Meagan. And Councillor Rentz? You're on mute.
And sometimes that's a safe place to be. How many delegations do we have? I have 7. Is there more than 7?
There are 9 now.
9. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Meagan Snyder is the first delegation. Meagan, are you with us? Welcome.
Yes, hello. Thank you.
You have 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you're down to the 1 minute mark. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. This is my first ever delegation, so I'm a little nervous. So thank you for your patience. I am here today as part of Unsheltered Campaign, which is a group of unhoused and housed people formed in 2020 in response to the impacts of COVID on the worsening housing crisis and part of Civic Hub Waterloo region. I myself am a homeowner in downtown Kitchener, a white settler on Indigenous land, and I grew up in Waterloo region. I have a 4-year-old daughter who is also growing up in Waterloo region. I want her to grow up in a region that leads with human rights at the forefront of all decision-making and policy creation. A region that demonstrates through its policy and actions that human beings are not disposable and do not deserve to be punished for trying to stay alive under layers of systemic injustice. A region where she, her friends, and her neighbors can always count on being housed as a human right in a forward-thinking, innovative region. I also want her to know that our family and people like us who are privileged homeowners with no lived expertise in being unhoused are not the ones who should be informing policy and strategy around homelessness. I know it was recently reported that the region is seeking advice from a Better Tent City and the Kitchener Lived Experience Group. Today, I want to delegate in support of continued work with these groups and others that have current and past lived expertise. This work needs to go beyond advice and consultation. Lived expertise needs to be a key factor in policy development and decision-making at every level of government, in every step of the process. With the disability activism slogan in mind, nothing about us without us, I would suggest that an additional recommendation be considered in addition to the existing list Council is voting on tonight. That is that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo will seek the knowledge and guidance of the Kitchener Lived Expertise Working Group to inform their program and policy development related to service provision to individuals experiencing chronic homelessness. That said, this rich and innovative work cannot be accomplished in good faith while the region is also in the middle of a lawsuit to evict residents of the 100 Victoria Street encampment. You cannot be asking folks to work with you and to lend you their invaluable expertise while also suing them. You cannot claim to be working on behalf of these people for their well-being while suing them. The lawsuits against various people living at and involved with the 100 Victoria Street encampment must be dropped, and encampments must be sanctioned as an interim solution while the region works with folks with the experience and expertise that will truly guide Waterloo Region to ending homelessness. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Meagan. For your first time, you hit it out of the park and you were under time, so well done. Any questions, councils? Thank you very much, Meagan. I was making notes. I'm sure lots of other people were too. Next delegation is Ed Edwards from Kitchener. Ed, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good evening.
5 minutes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it nice and quick. I am associated with, I'm not here representing the Housing Now Tent City, but I am associated to it, the one that's on the island in Willow River Park. We've been there for 7 weeks now, and my observations basically have been that people seem to be more worried about seeing the homeless than they are about the actual homelessness issue itself. So I just thought I might take a little twist on that and appeal to the politicians in you all that with election, it being an election year and it being the issue that we're trying to present, but that other people, their issue is seeing this. Either way, the solution is still to build housing. What people are seeing and what they're most upset about is things that happen every day behind closed doors, but when they see it out in public, they have an issue. And what they really need is they need the walls, the shelter that they can be behind, just like everybody else, and that will make everybody happy. And the only, I guess, thing I wanted to add is that in the area of there being either more low-income housing or more shelter, it also has to address the diversity of people who actually need these shelters. So we're talking about people who are pet owners that don't want to be separated from their pets, and I know a lot of homeless people that have pets, and that's their key support their key thing that like really keeps them going. So they can't be separated from them. There has to be spaces for families. There has to be spaces for youth, for women where they can be safe from other groups, for trans folks. So there needs to be kind of a diverse availability of space for these people. And that's really all I had to say on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. Are there any questions of the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, Ed, for coming forward with your concerns. The next delegation is a group, so you will have 10 minutes. And this is David Alton, Julian Ichim, and Mauleek Bhatt, Kitchener's Lived Expertise Working Group.
Hello again, councillors. Thank you for creating space for this conversation and for the voices of the Lived Expertise Working Group. After seeing the motion passed in committee last week, the Lived Expertise Working Group has been doing some more discernment on how these measures that the toolkit you've created can be best implemented and be most effective. And so two members from the working group today have prepared statements for you. So we have Julian Ichim and Fidelia Okoye, who are here to share their thoughts. And so I will pass it off to Julian first.
Dear citizens, councillors, and friends, I would like to take a few moments of your time to tell you a little bit about my experience being homeless, the downward spiral that I experienced, and why no one in this shit city should have to experience this. Parts of my story are violent and difficult, but I think it is important to share them to help you understand what criminalization of homelessness does. It was the winter of 2019 when I wore out my welcome at my friend's house. With my meager belongings in my bag, I needed to find a place to sleep. It was minus 26, a cold night. My clothing was wet, frozen against my skin. I needed to get out of the wind. Since I could not find a stairwell in the building to sleep in, I did decide to sleep in the parking garage at EB and Charles. Waking up a few hours later by a security guard shining a flashlight in my face and kicking me in the stomach. He told me it was private property, and he demanded that I let him search my pockets and bags, or he would use as much force as he thought necessary until police came. I told him he could call the cops all he wants, but if he touches me or my bag, I would call my lawyer, Steve Gale. He slapped me in the face and said if I'm not gone in 10 minutes, he would kick the shit out of me. Getting up with my feet wet, shoes filled with melted snow and cold, I got out of there as soon as possible. If I was lucky, I would find a place out of the cold, risking a beating and a robbing if someone wanted to show how tough they were or wanted to teach me a lesson. Of all the things, cold, hunger, violence, the worst part of being homeless is not having a place to go, a place to call your own, a place to just sit, sleep, or relax without fear of police, rent-a-cops, or predators beating you or harassing. A place where you can drop your mask and be yourselves. You have already heard and voted on the interim housing staff presented to you. I want you to know that that is very positive, and I also want you to reread what Mauleek proposed at the last meeting. With these proposals and the suggestions of the Lived Expertise Working Group, hundreds of people will now have a place to call home. Imagine if it was your child that was passed out in a drug house where the dealers take advantage of their state and assaults them. I know this happens in this community because it happened to me. I was called out of my legally prescribed opioid, so I went to someone's house. When I got there, the only thing he had was what I thought was heroin, which is very similar to the prescribed opioid. I smoked it, passed out, and woke up with my pants on my knees. Imagine your child having to sleep with some old guy just to have a warm place to sleep. Many of my friends have had to do this. We know from our networks, children and youth who are experiencing this, who are falling through the cracks and are predators. We know that people see our homeless friends as predators, as burdens on society. This fuels the othering and criminalization of the poor. when the reality is the opposite. People are profiled into the worthy and unworthy pool. While it is not reflected in the current practice, housing is a basic human right, not a privilege. A right is something that people have by virtue of being human. To deny someone a place to live is to deny someone the right to exist.
Oh, I know. What the shit?
Are not created to fight the cities. They are created so people have a safe place to exist. To vote for these proposals is to affirm people's right to exist. And doing so from a human rights approach will make these measures even better. For example, are you going to stop the legal action against people in the encampments? Can you redirect the money you will save to increase the 3.4 million you are giving staff and agencies? Will you fund civilian response teams immediately, where people can talk to people with lived experience, people understand what they're going through? You have said sanctioned encampments. Will you give staff and those with lived experience the power to quickly sanction land for encampments and squatting? Finally, I see that the funding request from SASC was rejected. This was very disappointing. Sexual assault and homelessness are directly connected. Empowering partnering agencies, people with lived experience, and peer support works is a much better approach. Thank you.
And now we'll pass it on to Fidelia. Oh wait, that's you, Dana, first, right? There you are.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Fidelia Okweje. I am one of the founders and the current president of Nigerians in the region of Waterloo, Nairo. I sit with some amazing folks on the Lived Expertise Working Group. I had my close experience to homelessness in 2013 when I came into Canada, a pregnant student at Conestoga College. Prior to leaving my country, I had secured a 4-month lease. However, my landlord, on seeing me pregnant, told me my lease would be up after the agreed 4 months. From then on, I tried to secure another room before the expiration of my lease, but couldn't find any as I kept rejections upon rejections. I had my baby and was fortunate to have someone take me into their home right from the hospital. This is someone I just met, took myself and the newborn into their home. My baby and I had to squat for weeks until we found a kind-hearted landlord who was willing to rent to a new mom and her baby. This experience was one of the reasons we gave that Nairo was birthed. My experience is not peculiar to me, as there are predatory landlords who make finding and keeping housing difficult for people. There will be more homeless people if families in our Nairo community are not housing people experiencing precarious housing situations. I believe we can achieve more if the region steps up as a partner in addressing homelessness. In Finland, 0.1% of the population is experiencing homelessness currently because they are not delaying a housing first approach. They are implementing it by putting resources towards it. In Helsinki, no one sleeps on the streets. Between 2010 and 2018, Finland has enjoyed a 40% decline in homelessness rate. During the pandemic, homelessness did not increase. Here in Kitchener, homelessness is rising exponentially. We are asking the region for a more practical approach to housing first. We are asking that more funds be allocated to services such as transitional homes for the unsheltered and those experiencing hidden homelessness. We ask that funds be allocated to training of staff to use trauma-informed approaches in supporting homeless people, rather than approaches that further re-traumatizes them. Frontline workers must also be empowered and know that they will be supported when implementing housing first approaches. Let's transform aspiration into action together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, counselors, for creating space for us to kind of continue to share some insights that we are having at the Lived Expertise Working Group. We are excited to see that the motions are, the toolkit is expanding and that you are unanimously supporting that moving forward. And we want to continue supporting those toolkits and the resources you send to staff to make sure that they are as effective as possible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And you have 50 seconds to spare, so well timed. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Verbanovich, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Not a question as much as I just want to thank the three delegates for coming and speaking this, I guess it's evening now, or almost evening. I think you certainly bring an important perspective, particularly in terms of the work that you're doing as part of the Lived Experience Working Group in Kitchener, but also from your experience. And so just want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I see no more questions or comments, so thank you very much. The next delegation is Brooklin Wallis from Kitchener. Brooklin, welcome. You have the floor and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for having me, Chair. I just want to say that is one presentation to follow up with. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak in front of all of you again. Just briefly, thank you for passing the ROP as it was. It's very exciting to see the changes that myself and so many others delegated for. To start, a short anecdote. I saw a tweet the other day that asked the question, paraphrased, if you woke up with $20 to your name, no contacts or friends, and were entirely unhoused, what would you do? The comments revealed to me a massive misunderstanding of what homelessness is actually like. So many of the comments were along the lines of, apply to jobs as soon as possible. I'd just go sleep in a shelter. I'd stay clean so I can interview well. How do you apply to a job with no fixed address? How do you sleep in a shelter that's full? How do you stay clean when there's no bathroom for you to use? Moving to policy, the region's interim response to homelessness as presented to us is great, but without another motion, or as long as we currently have our legal actions against encampments, it's all sadly just for show. We cannot be saying that our system will be improved, that we'll be allowing a hybrid or outdoor model while evicting dozens of people right before the winter. If we don't help them before the court date, the court rules against them and they are removed without a place to go, we as a region have committed a great injustice that people will look at in the future with shame and disappointment. Many have tried to appeal to the council's sense of humanity before, saying to imagine their child or themselves as homeless. Considering that we have homeless people, this appears not to be working. Ignoring the transitive properties implication here, I'll just try to appeal to your sense of ego. Can you imagine how it would look to someone who grew up in the 2030s if 30 years ago, council authorized staff to use a hybrid model in August and then evicted a community using this hybrid model, just their own version of it, 3 months later? As a note for staff while creating the homelessness master plan, if we really want to end homelessness, it's possible. You might have seen that Medicine Hat declared itself functionally free of homelessness. No offense to Medicine Hat, but I think that if we can do it, we can too. Housing First is emerging worldwide as the best solution to homelessness that any humans anywhere so far have come up with. And it's time that the region stops ignoring the world for something that was made in Waterloo. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Brooklyn. I see no questions or comments, and you have time to spare. So thank you for being concise and focused. The next delegation is Kevin White, Waterloo Region, Yes, in My Backyard. Kevin, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good
Welcome,
evening.
and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I wish to begin my delegation with words of support. The staff report regarding the interim housing strategy recommendation and actions suggested therein indicates a tonal shift in the ongoing conversation at the regional level regarding policies that deeply impact populations in need of housing and other supports. We also noticed a greater engagement with lived experience expertise. In particular, we wish to give credit to Strategy 4, Permit Managed Hybrid Outdoor Model, which provides a basis for allowing at least some encampments. It has been highlighted at previous council meetings the importance of allowing encampments and meeting people where they are at for reasons which still stand. Evictions of encampments are traumatic events that break trust, hurt relationships, and can easily put the lives and well-being of encampment residents at risk, significantly more so than before evictions. This lack of safety and security also makes it even focus on finding housing, further compounding the cycle of homelessness. Yes, there are shelters. However, there are many different reasons people are either unable to stay in shelters or make the difficult choice not to stay in shelters, including safety concerns, not being allowed to stay at a shelter for a certain time, autonomy, avoiding temptations of alcohol and other drugs, or needing different levels or types of harm reduction than allowed for. Moreover, shelters do not currently have the space to accommodate all encampment residents, as Waterloo Region's Director of Housing Services has acknowledged. Saying encampments are expensive is missing the point. Homelessness is expensive and evictions are expensive. Encampments don't exist simply because we don't evict them, and they quite often appear somewhere else if we do evict them. In many cases, evicted residents then become less safe than they would have been as they are pushed further afield from their community, a community that they may have chosen for their own safety, and further from outreach and other supports. Evictions don't contribute to ending homelessness, which is the root problem we must focus on. This requires strong relationships between unsheltered people and support workers, which we can't afford to damage with evictions. Our comments on Strategy 4 have taken priority because we understand it is a more challenging but no less important component to any regional strategy on ending homelessness. The other components of the staff report are also vitally important, and we are pleased to see additional supporting recommendations in the agenda for today's meeting. We see each component as complementary, and we were relieved by Peter Sweeney's assurance that the idea was for them to be done concurrently. Our support for this report and its recommendations is strengthened by that understanding. We confess we are concerned, however, that the region, through recent actions, has not shown commitment corresponding to the tonal shift we described previously. There is still a court case looming over the site on Victoria Street, which threatens eviction. The criminalization of homelessness continues through this. We would reiterate that merely the state of being homeless is conceived as criminal through this, which is a most troubling and cruel attitude. There is also the significant issue of denial of funding for community agencies. The actions outlined in the Interim Housing Solutions Recommendations document would only be strengthened by support for the very community partners and organizations to which funding was recently denied. We fully support the region's push to have more provincial funding for the vital goal of ending homelessness. We agree that the province is well suited with deep resources to put towards this task. This doesn't mean we are any less adamant that as regional councillors, you do everything in your power as well for homelessness, including using regional funds. We do hope that the actions and commitments of the region will match the words that staff have put forward and continue to refine in consultation with members of the community impacted by the recommendations from the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I see no questions or comments, but thank you very much for coming to make your intervention. The next delegation is Robert Deutschmann, North Dumfries.
Thank you, Madam Chair Redmond, councillors and staff. First, I just want to say that looking at the agenda today, there's lots of positives in that agenda today. And I just want to echo Councillor Galloway's comments about the regional official plan and the region's reputation for its innovation in this area. And shameless plug, if you go to episode 27 of the Old Grey Mayor's podcast, you'll see an interview with Jerry Thompson talking about that first innovative plan. But I'm delegating today in support of 7.1.2 on your agenda, the recommended motion regarding the interim response to homelessness, and the recommended motion 8.1 showing where the funding will come from. I'm very encouraged with the steps that council and staff have taken to recognize encampments through the hybrid shelter outdoor model listed as item 4. Recognizing camps as part of the solution to homelessness is a recognition that living rough is a reality for many, and it is incumbent upon the region, working with community partners in the cities and townships, to find ways for campers to live safely. I encourage the region to continue its outreach and work with social agencies that are on the ground, currently providing assistance to campers like those of Victoria and Weber. We have a strong resource available in Kitchener's Lived Expertise Working Group. This is an across the region, all hands on deck emergency. The region and cities need to identify safe spaces for camping. If we're to show that our two-tier model is working, this issue will demonstrate that. We can advocate to the provincial and federal governments for assistance, but we must operate as if we're not going to receive that assistance anytime soon. Waterloo region can accomplish much. We did it before with the substantial increases in discretionary benefits when the province downloaded services and responsibilities without the financial means. We responded by significantly increasing discretionary benefits. I commend staff and council for the motion at 8.1 that comes up with a funding plan to support the interim housing solutions. I recognize that the region is funding this plan, and some on council are fairly concerned about that. We cannot wait for the province and federal governments to respond. This is an emergency, a public health emergency. I support the idea of development charges being considered. We have developers offering funds for housing projects now. Let's consider how we can best incorporate this generosity. And yes, the province and federal governments absolutely need to step up and provide us with funding. We should not have to deal with this alone. You will no doubt keep up the advocacy, like the advocacy work of the big city mayors. The urgency of the situation and the necessary response is immediate. And unfortunately, we can't wait for the provincial or federal governments to respond. They should be providing us with an envelope of funds without strings attached, without their one-size-fits-all approach, so we can apply those funds to what we believe is the best solution for our community, a Made in Waterloo solution. Now, I believe this proposed approach at 7.12 demonstrates an intention on the part of the regional council to recognize the reality and take away the stigma and criminalization of homelessness. However, you need to take it further, and I urge you to stop the court application. The application is inconsistent with the tone and intention of this new approach that the region is proposing. We have limited energies, resources, and money that needs to be directed to and focused on finding solutions, not evictions. This court action will only result in the authorization of police force, perhaps. And that is not a positive outcome. By stopping this court application, you'll be sending a more positive message, demonstrating an intent to stop criminalizing the homeless. You don't need the courts to tell you what to do. The court is not the forum for this issue to be dealt with. The horseshoe that you sit at physically and virtually is where this matter needs and can be resolved, working with staff and the community to come up with a solution that deals with the homelessness and considers the neighborhoods and businesses where camps are located. We're a blessed community. We're a community rich with resources. We are a generous community. Working together, talking together, we can find a positive, helping path forward. And you've started that process today with these two motions. I congratulate you for that, and thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. I see a hand. Councillor Foxton, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A while back, we have a new apartment building within the town of there, and it's rental. And I found that when those rental apartments came in, it was single mothers or fathers, new divorcees, or seniors that were coming to be close to their families. Now, a motion was put forward that they go to condos. And a lot of the people there said, Sue, if we do this to condos, we have nowhere to go. We'll lose our homes. So I congratulate my council on making those rental apartments still rentals. Now, Mr. Deutschmann, would you agree with that? Because I believe you were supporting the condo plan.
No, I don't know where you get that from.
I actually have your emails.
No, I don't. I think the issue was process. And I remember the concern I had was I just wanted to ensure that North Dumfries Township Council did not put itself in a situation where it could be criticized for the process that they took. The end result, I completely support. What I was concerned about was the process. So that was the concern I had at the time. Now, those are not, those apartments aren't affordable rents, and they're not dealing with homelessness. So I'm not quite sure why that issue came up with respect to this matter, but it's not dealing with the homelessness issue.
I'm going to intervene here as chair and just say we don't debate with delegations. And so I'm going to stop the intervention right now and ask if there are any other questions. And seeing none, I would thank you, Rob, for coming in. And
Thank
the
you.
next delegation is Laura Pinn from Hamilton. Laura, you have the floor and you have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, counselors, for having me. My name's Laura Pinn. I'm an assistant professor of political science at Wilfrid Laurier's Waterloo campus. And though I'm not a resident of the region, I work closely with many local organizations, including the Unsheltered campaign. I do work on public policy, democratic participation, housing policy, and I've published many academic articles as well as policy reports for organizations, including the Federal National Housing Council. I want to recognize and acknowledge the incredible amount of work from staff that went into the preparation of the interim housing report, which I've read, including consultation with residents of 100 Victoria. I find that the suggestions in that report provide a strong basis for working constructively with community members to develop short-term strategies and longer-term solutions to the crisis of unsheltered homelessness in the region. And importantly, they're connected to funding. I hope the Regional Council will adopt the report and associated motions. I hope other municipalities are taking notes as to how the region of Waterloo has approached this. But I'm not just here deputing today to support the interim housing report, but also to concern, as several others have, that an attempt to actualize the very useful and well-articulated strategies in the report is undermined by the continued legal case the region of Waterloo has put forward Ontario's Superior Court of Justice to forcibly displace residents of 100 Victoria, including with police involvement. To read from court documents, as you know, the region is seeking an interim and final order that any persons having notice of the order are restrained and enjoined from breaching the Code of Use bylaw by remaining or re-entering the property municipally known as 100 Victoria Street North. And also an order that any police officer with the Waterloo Regional Police Service and any other police authority shall have authorization to arrest and remove any person who has knowledge of the order and who the police have reasonable and probable grounds to believe is contravening or has contravened any provision of the order. I am concerned that the continuation of this court case is part of a practice that forcibly displaces and criminalizes people who experience homelessness. I'm concerned that the court case represents a poor use of scarce funds and energy, not only by the region, but also by various community actors who, rather than trying to address the needs of our unsheltered neighbors, will be forced to spend time engaging with the court case, time and energy that would be better spent working towards some of the objectives outlined in the interim housing report. And I'm concerned specifically with two absences in the interim housing report. First, there's no mention of the decriminalization of people experiencing homelessness on public lands. So the report does explore outdoor housing options for up to 50 people, but as we know, many more than 50 people are experiencing unsheltered homelessness in the region. What happens to these people if they are not able to shelter in place while more permanent housing solutions are explored? And second, I'm concerned by the absence of an explicit human rights framework in terms of moving forward with the interim housing strategy. And so I would encourage as regional council to consider those two absences, as well as the continuation of the court case and the way that limits the good work I think that can be accomplished through that strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laura. I see no questions or comments, so thank you for coming to express your information and your concerns. The next delegation is Nadine Green, A Better Tent City. And Nadine, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
You ready? Hello?
Yep.
Hi. Hello, my name is Nadine Green. I was born in Jamaica. I came to Canada when I was 16 years old. I'm pleased to be here this evening to tell my story. I had a corner store in downtown Kitchener for several years. Some people experiencing homelessness would come inside, sit at my table, have a bite to eat, and maybe play a game of pool. I knew everyone by name, and I learned most of their stories. One winter night in 2018, I closed my store at 4 a.m., which that was the time I closed, and I started to go home. As I was leaving home, I saw people outside. It was very cold. I turned back and I let them in. As I opened my door, they said, "Is it okay?" I said, "I cannot let you guys stay out here in this cold." So I let them in. And that was the start of my pop-up shelter. There were 30, 40 people a night coming in for shelter. In the early 2020, at the start of the pandemic, I was evicted from my store for acting like a residence. And as you know, you can't have a residence in a business district. Looking back on this now, I'm thankful for the eviction, because it led me to my job offer from Ron Doyle and Jeff Wilmer to live and work at Lot 42. This was the start of A Better Tent City. A Better Tent City is a self-help tiny home community providing a sense of belonging for some of our region's unsheltered. In the beginning, people lived in tents placed inside a portion of the unused event space. We gradually got better. Now, many of those who were staying in my store, along with others, now live at A Better Tent City. We have 50 residents who live in 43 tiny homes, each about 8 by 10 feet in size. We have no more tents at A Better Tent City.
Nadine, you have 1 minute left.
The people live on their own terms. We have washroom, showers, laundry, and internet. There are meals, plans, activity, indoor. We support one another. We have a sense of family. We have pets. We have everything. A Better Tent City works. I know it works because I live there. And we have 50 people who would have been missed. We don't want to miss anyone anymore. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Nadine. I see a couple of hands up, so you might have some questions. Councillor Foxton, you have a question for the delegation.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Nadine, thank you so much. You housing those people in your business started the idea and the concepts towards A Better Tent City, and you've done amazingly well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Well, thank you for your presentation. One question we're asked quite a bit, and we're asked to look at the Better Tent City, is the size of it. I'm wondering if you can speak to, the number of individuals living at the Better Tent City. Obviously at 100 Victoria, we are in a surplus of 50 plus people. I believe our colleague Elizabeth Clark had talked about the ideal size that they wouldn't exceed, I think, in the 40s. I'm wondering if you can talk about, if there are particular rules around the Better Tent City in terms of the number of units, number of people. Is there an ideal size to the community? Perhaps shed some light on that.
So I think that 50 people or less will work. Because, we have 50 people at A Better Tent City, and I handled the 50 people, but maybe 50 or less will work. If you have more than 50, then it becomes problematic. So 50 is ideal.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Urbanovich, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Nadine. Great to have you here this evening and sharing a little bit about the story and the journey we've been on in getting the project to what it is today. And I know you, the late Ron Doyle, Jeff Wilmer, Father Toby, and Tony D'Amato Storts, and have all
Laura Hamilton, please
Laura
don't forget
Hamilton
Laura
as well.
Hamilton.
Yes, I mean, so many people and the new board have all played such an important role in getting it all to where it is today. It'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to maybe talk just a little bit. I know a lot of other cities have been looking at what you're doing, and in fact, just this week, a book about A Better Tent City actually got released, and so I figured I'd use this as an opportunity to ask a question and have you just touch on that.
Yes, Tony worked for us at A Better Tent City. Tony actually quit, and when he was quitting, I said, Tony, please do not quit. Are you going to work for something in housing? Because I know Tony was good. He worked with the people who were experiencing homelessness, and he didn't know what he was going to do as yet. And I thought he was going to be working for Tip Top, but then eventually he's doing Better Homes or Better something. And I am so happy that he stayed on to work with homelessness, because he is amazing and he's wonderful and his book is amazing. I'm so proud of him.
And Nadine, have you had a number of other cities come and meet with you folks, to groups from other cities to learn from you?
Yes, like we've had people from Hamilton, Belleville, Winnipeg, like as far as Winnipeg, somebody came and visited us, Guelph, everywhere, just wanted to get a piece of what we're doing. And I think it's just amazing.
Wonderful. Well, certainly just want to take this opportunity again to thank all of you for your many hours of patience, commitment, and focus on the residents that you serve. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair, and Nadine, thanks for coming. And I just want to acknowledge that I was one of the people who 2 years ago was quite dubious about a better tent city. I didn't see how it was going to work. I didn't see how it was going to work as a shelter, and it was constantly being sort of portrayed as an alternative to shelter. And that's really not the direction you've gone. You're really supportive housing, I would say now, and I really I think you've proven that that's a model that really works. And when I talk to people as recently as today about what a managed encampment means to me, I said, like a better tent city, where there are there's supports are there, but there's people there sort of, keeping things cool, and there's caps on numbers, and there's some controls over who comes in and out. But there is that sense of community that people are looking for, and there are all of those supports. So I've gone from thinking, I don't know that a better tent city really has a place here, to thinking it definitely does have a place here, and that's thanks in large part to what you've done, and I think the evidence is there.
Thank you, Elizabeth. But we have 50 of the most amazing people at a better tent city. As I said, we could have missed them, and they're just so amazing, and I love all of them. Thank you.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Nadine, for being here and for the work that you're doing. I have a question on the number of people that you have 50 there now. What kind of movement is there with people coming and going, or when people come, are they staying, or what's the transition like in people coming and going?
So we do have people that come in just to drop in, and whenever somebody comes, I always say, "Are you hungry?" which is usually a yes, and I always offer them a meal. They can have a shower if they like, and then they usually hang out for a couple of days, and they always say, "Can you put me on the list? Can I get a tiny home?" So people are interested in that, the people who are living rough, and they usually stay for a few days and then they move on. Or some people have stayed and got on the list and got a home.
So what would be the longest stay of somebody that's currently living there? Has somebody been there from the beginning?
Yes, we always have. So how we do it at a better tent city, we never tell you there's a time limit. We just let people live as long as they need to. Until we had a couple people that got offered an apartment at Block Line. So we always just wait, because if you tell somebody that they have to move, then they get anxiety, they get stressed. So we always just give them as much time as they need to heal. And healing takes a long time.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah. And my assumption is that that you have rules, and probably from time to time people are asked that if they're not prepared to abide by the rules, they have to leave, the same as it would happen in the shelter system. Does that, yeah, okay.
Yes, like we do have some rules. Like the rules are not that strict. It's just some rules that we try to, and like sometimes we try to make the rules that if they break the rules, we try to work with them so they try to mend their ways, and then they can stay.
Thank you, and continue the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nadine. The next delegation, I think, is sitting right beside you, Char Lee from Kitchener. Charlene, you have 3 minutes, and you have the floor.
You lead good. Am
I on? Okay. Hello, sorry. Hi, I'm Char. And I'm sure you all know me, or most of you know me, from all the important advocacy work I do. I am happy that the region has stepped up and has started listening to the homeless people and including us in decision making. I want to talk about the importance of supports for transitional housing. When I was homeless, it was the impact of my step home worker who worked with me through the entire journey. She made me feel comfortable enough to talk to her and open up. She went to court with me and helped me deal with legal matters such as my mom's death. She was with me at the complex and at EB Village. She introduced me to the PAG, which is the People Action Group ran by the city and the region, and taught me to be an advocate. She was there at Mary's place and then 2 years after. This was the hardest time of my life. When I first moved to EB, it was great. The staff were so involved and supportive. That support lessened over time, hugely. Housing is not enough. I was angry and I felt like nothing I said mattered. It was my long-term worker who got me through this and into Conestoga College. I'm happy to hear that you are talking about funding interim housing options. But if you are not talking about increasing funding to outreach workers, peer support workers, and lived experience, these projects won't work. I want you to fund more 24/7 drop-in centers. I believe that with housing and homelessness, there should be a comfortable spot for them to be. For example, giving them a spot to talk about how they feel. I strongly feel that it should be run by lived experience peers working beside them to make someone feel safer. One main worker to guide them and understand all the ways from start to finish.
Char Lee, you have 1 minute left.
I'm almost done. Makes a huge difference. Now I lost my page. Oh no. Okay. People working beside them to make someone feel safer. One main worker to guide them and understand all the ways from start to finish. Makes a huge difference, like my worker did for me. I have been through all these systems, so I know what outreach and drop-in programs work. I hope to continue working with the region and ensure the best housing measures possible. Thank you for your time. Sorry about that. I got lost when you said something.
Sorry, the prompt was meant to be helpful, not to throw you off. So thank you for finishing. I don't see any questions. I think people saved them up and asked Nadine all the questions. But thank you.
It's okay. I work with her too.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we are now going to turn to the Community Services Committee summary, interim response to homelessness, August 9th, 2022. And there is a motion to support this. Councillor Bravanovich, I see your hand up, and I know that Councillor Clark wanted to speak to this too, so go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, and maybe just some questions of staff, if we can, first, with respect to the report. First of all, I mean, we have obviously the report that we dealt with at committee coming forward tonight, and I was pleased to move it there, and certainly would, if nobody else is moving it, would be pleased to move it here as well, along with the additional recommendations. I do have a few questions, though. I do notice the reference in the secondary report looking at the issue of potentially incorporating this in future regional development charge bylaws. And I think this is something new for us. And I'm wondering if staff can, just sort of speak to what the thinking is on this, what we've learned, and is this something that is happening in other cities or something that we're wanting to explore? Just would like to understand it a little better.
Mr. Dyer?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Madam.
This is what happens when we let you have a few days vacation, isn't it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm happy to speak to this recommendation. So the Development Charges Act allows municipalities to recover capital costs for a number of services. The region's current development charge bylaw does not have a development charge for housing. And that's to a large extent because when we did the last background study, we didn't really have a long-term capital plan for housing. This was prior to the adoption of the Waterloo Region Housing Master Plan, most significantly. There are municipalities in the province, several municipalities in the province that do have a development charge for housing. It's relatively modest in most cases, and that's typically because of the significant waiting list that exists, and the Development Charges Act only allows for a certain portion of capital costs to be recovered. So when the tender report came forward for the King's Court development back in June, we included a recommendation in that report for the region to include capital costs associated with housing in the next background study. And that's because there's a clause in the Development Charges Act that requires council to indicate its intent to recover costs from DCs. So we've generally replicated that recommendation in this report so that to the extent that capital costs are incurred, we have the ability to include them in our next background study. So this is not saying at this point that there will definitively be a development charge for housing, but it's allowing for that option and allowing for the subsequent council, when they're considering development charge policy, to consider whether they want to include a DC for housing. I hope that's helpful.
Councillor Baranovich?
Yeah, no, very, very, very helpful and very encouraging. And I like the fact that we're being proactive in terms of dealing with this issue now and making sure that we potentially can recover any acquisitions if that opportunity ultimately presents itself and the subsequent council makes a decision to include it. I guess my next question would be to Mr. Sweeney. Just, I'm sort of looking at the issues that, we're dealing with, in particular, the fact that, we've got Weber Victoria, that we're seeing spillover from Weber Victoria into Victoria Park, that the city's having to deal with and the costs that we're incurring there. We know that the Edith McIntosh operation, I believe, is currently only slated until the end of August. And we also know that the House of Friendship is slated to open at some point in the fall. I'm wondering if we can get some updates on both of those projects and where they're at. And then just an understanding in terms of how those, in particular, how the House of Friendship project will be populated in relation to, both the Weber Victoria location and also the fact that it has spilled over into a public park that's utilized by the community every day. And, some of the supports that we might be able to count on in that regard.
Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. As you've outlined, there are currently a number of challenges affecting the system across Waterloo Region. The plan that we presented last week at Council and then is before you today is intended to take a system-level view and is not intended to be focused on, one particular area of this community. In terms of the specific challenges that you've mentioned, we continue to do the work that we have the resources to support those living at 100 Victoria. Again, we are working with our community partners, in particular, the Working Centre in Sanguine, to support those that are living in that encampment, and doing our level best with the resources and the access to services that we have to provide options for those folks. We continue to do that. We've also been working with officials at the City of Kitchener in terms of in the BIA specifically to respond, and with some partners for enhanced street outreach. And yet the challenge continues to be right in front of us. And I want to make clear that the work that we're proposing here is our response as a staff through our own work and our own analysis, but also with conversations with those in the community in terms of to address the acuity of the situation across Waterloo region, which includes the locations that you mentioned. These are the resources that we think we have to enhance and focus on to address that. You asked a specific question around the House of Friendship. My understanding in my recent conversation with the leadership of the House of Friendship is they are targeting mid to late fall. I can't give you a definitive answer of how many people who might be currently living in one area may move into that facility. That will be determined by the eligibility list, and so we will have to be cautious that we're continuing to provide those services on an as-needed basis based on eligibility. So all to say, there's a lot of moving parts here, and we're putting forward our best effort right now to address all those moving parts and to do that as quickly as possible.
Councillor Ravanovich?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just specifically then with respect, because we're, I guess, 13 days away from the end of August, and I'm just, I think we need to have some comfort that there will be some sort of plan with respect to the individuals at Edith McIntosh, and that it's not going to add to the challenges that we're already facing in the community. And so I'm wondering if you can comment on that, please.
Yeah, certainly. So the current contract with the Working Centre to operate the temporary shelter at Edith Mac expires on August 31st. I was in a meeting just yesterday with stakeholders, including the Working Centre and the Waterloo Catholic School Board and the principal of Cameron Heights. And so we are moving forward with that plan and looking to finalize, hopefully later this week or early next, a more fulsome plan to support those who would be currently accessing Edith McIntosh to have other options. And our goal is that we will not see a decrease in the number of shelter beds in the system as of August 31st. And we've got a few contingency plans that we're working through. And through you, Madam Chair, once we have some more definitive information on what that might look like. Again, not trying to be elusive or vague, but there's a lot of moving parts in this particular process. And regardless of where that ends, in terms of specifically related to Edith Mac, a fulsome sort of neighborhood and stakeholder and communications plan will be developed in response to that.
No, and for sure, and I want to, as I did last week, acknowledge the immense amount of work that you and your team have been doing in this regard in terms of looking for updates. I recognize that we don't have all the answers yet, but I think it is important that we keep the community as informed as possible as we continue to deal with this very complex issue. The last question I have, and then if I may make just a couple comments, is with respect to the dialogue with the municipal partners. I mean, all of these solutions, wherever they occur, whether in the cities or the townships, are going to require collaboration both with those municipal partners as well as with the service delivery partners. And so I'm just, and I know that was part of the report and the recommendations and the comments that were made last week. Just wondering what outreach has happened in that regard since last week, and what are those, what are the plans? Because what absolutely is key is that outreach doesn't happen after the fact. That when we walk down the aisle together, and so that's going to be a really important piece of this.
Mr. Sweeney, and then Councillor Ravanovich, I'm happy to come back to you. I have other speakers.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the past week, as a regional staff team, we have begun to put together, a plan to action this. We of course respect the position of council in this decision making, and so we do not yet have the delegated authority to start moving ahead and allocation of resources. That being said, we very much appreciated the unanimous support at committee last week, and so have begun the process. I've heard from some of our key contacts in other municipalities in support of the work that we're doing and willing and wishing to be part of that. And so I'm encouraged by that. And yes, specifically, this is not, intended to be, nor will it be a plan that we move forward with that will be done in isolation. I want to acknowledge the feedback that we heard from the delegations this evening around the importance of continuing the dialogue and bringing really meaningful consultation. And that is, of course, with those who have experiences that are gained through the lived experience, and whether that's current or previous, but also the perspectives of our partners in the municipalities across Waterloo region, because as you mentioned, and I believe Chair Redmond, you also made a poignant point at the end of last week's dialogue that these enhancements of the toolkit are by and large going to require new locations, new sites, assets across this community that include all of our municipal partners. So it will continue to be a key and important piece of this work.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll chime back in for comments later and to move on.
I'm going to go to Councillor Clark next. Go ahead, Councillor Clark.
Thanks. I actually wanted to make some comments as chair of the Community Services Committee, but I can wait until all the questions have been asked and answered, if that's all right.
Okay, I'll circle back to you then. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to go back to the question on development charges and try to understand. So where will these DCs take, what housing will these DCs take effect on? Can you respond to that, Mr. Dyer? Or is that to be determined in a study?
You need to put your mic on.
I certainly do. Thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, it's perhaps a bit early to answer that question, but let me just try this. The current development charge bylaw allows for the recovery of capital costs for numerous regional services, and the development charge is applied against both residential and non-residential development. So theoretically, what we would do is look at, on the housing side, we would look at capital costs incurred in 2022 and 2023, the 10-year capital program, to get a sense of the extent of capital expenditure planned for housing over that period. And then we would go through what is a fairly complicated calculation to determine how much of those capital costs are actually eligible to be recovered from development charges. And then there would be a policy decision to be made by, actually a couple of policy decisions to be made by council. The first would be, is there going to be a development charge for housing at all? And if there is it a charge that we would look to put against both residential and non-residential development? So it would form part of the development charge that would be assessed against single-family homes, against apartment buildings, against multi-residential properties. That will all be up to a future council to decide when a new development charges bylaw comes forward. And just from a timing perspective, Madam Chair, the current development charges bylaw has an expiry date of July 31st, 2024. So we will be undertaking a new background study starting later this fall, and that will take us through most of next year. And over the course of that time, we will engage the incoming council in a policy discussion as well. And then there will be an opportunity, I would say, in the first quarter of 2024 for obviously for input and debate and discussion and approval of a new bylaw.
Councillor Erb.
I understand that totally. Thank you. what I commend you for this initiative and some more creativity in how we find the funding. I think what ends up is this is defaulting back to the region to raise the funds out of the property tax bases eventually that are paid through development charges, because we're not getting the money from the province, and so it's just another conversation we have to have within the region to how are we going to raise these funds. So anyway, I support what you're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Urban. Before I go to Councillor Shantz, I just want to point out that there actually are two reports, and before the second one, which is what some of the questions we're now posing on, there is a presentation by staff. So, but feel free to, everybody's sort of been asking about both reports, so just want to point out that there's a bit of additional information to come. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, and maybe this is in the additional information to come, but my question or comment is around the word managed, and listening to Nadine's delegation, and I very much appreciated her coming and delegating today. I suspect she was kind of modest when she talked about her role at a Better Tent City, and I think the idea of modeling community behavior is really important. So I guess to staff, what does managed mean, and how does that fit into the model that a Better Tent City has used? And I know some other agencies have used where there's someone there who actually sort of models what community looks like.
Peter?
Thank you, Councillor Shantz. It's an important distinction, and I think it's one that we articulate as well. I'll do my best to articulate as well as I can so that there is no confusion. And while the specifics of what the management might look like, I believe still needs to be worked out, we are trying to do our best to be deliberate that what we envision and the conversations we had with community and received feedback on was around the importance of wrapping supports and some parameters around a site that might look like this. And again, I know I've been sort of non-committal on a location and the type of structure, because I think that still, is highly dependent on a number of factors. But we certainly do not envision a scenario where there's a piece of land and, basically here it is and good luck. That is not what we have in mind. And, I can't speak to the specifics of a Better Tent City model, although I'm learning more every day, and I appreciate Nadine's comments. But essentially imagine an environment where, as Councillor Clark referred to, there's some support staff. There is some consideration on the number of people who are there. There are some rules in place. There is a connection with the eligibility list, in terms of ensuring that for those that need additional supports, we have those wraparounds, that staff are involved in some way. So I think the point is that when we talk about the notion of it being managed versus, on its own, it's really about ensuring that the structures that may be on that location, are still to be determined. But what's really, really important is that, we have some parameters around how it's operated. We envision that we would potentially have an opportunity for a service partner to be sort of responsible for the location, for the site, and for the outcomes. So that's what we mean by that, Councillor Shantz. I hope, does that clarify a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so. I think the importance of having someone on site who, and maybe this is where the lived experience piece comes in, who can actually help to create a sense of community with the people, I think helps to mitigate some of the other problems that sometimes come up. But I'm not an expert in this field, so I will leave those details to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't have all those details because, part of this is hopefully an effort to understand that we've asked for the opportunity to, so to permit a new tool in the toolbox, to go back to some of the language I used last week, and still to be determined on how best that might look. And again, to the commitment we made early on and to what we heard again tonight with some of our delegates, is to ensure that we're connecting with people who have the type of experience that can really inform how this might roll out. And you heard Char talk about, a place where it would actually be potentially staffed by those who have this kind of experience. We've heard that in some of our delegations and some of our consultations as well. The point I think I would like to make sure is that we're talking about a place that has the supports in place in whatever way that looks like, that we have some ability to support, what it looks like, the supports that are there, both physical and emotional, and that there are staff, of either regional staff or of a partner agency, that are there on a consistent basis, if not all the time, to support the people who choose to live there.
So
thank you.
Colleagues, I'm going to go to Councillor Vrbanovich and then to Councillor Clark, and then I'm going to call a question if I have a mover and a seconder. And this is approving the summary from the Community Services Interim Response to Homelessness from August 9th, 2022. So Councillor Vrbanovich, go ahead. You had mentioned earlier, do you want to move it?
Yeah, happy to move both sets of
Just move this one for now, please.
Okay.
And take them separately.
That's fine. I'll move this one for now. My next, I do have actually one more question and then my comments, Madam Chair. Mr. Sweeney, just one of the updates that I had asked for last week was sort of there's a report that we used to get at different degrees of regularity about the state of our shelter system and how it's used. I believe it goes out to the shelters, I think I've been told, on a daily basis. It's probably too frequent for council, but I'm wondering, at least for those members of council that are interested in it, since it's being circulated anyway, it shouldn't be too much more difficult to add a few people to the email list. Could we potentially get it on a weekly basis so that we're aware of I think this is a major issue in the community. I think it's important that we stay, from a dashboard perspective, aware of what the issue is, particularly with winter coming.
Yes, I can certainly make that happen.
Okay, thank you. So just from a comment point of view, Madam Chair, I do want to again thank Mr. Sweeney and the team that have done an extensive amount of work on this in a short period of time since June. I want to also acknowledge all of the community partners, whether it's the municipalities, the agencies that we partner with, as well as those with lived experience. And there have been a number that staff have been consulting with to help inform the report and the recommendations as we're going forward. This is an important step that we're embarking on today, but one that we know, as has been pointed out even by some of the delegations, that we have to be prepared that we may have to go at this on our own, at least initially. I think there is some opportunity for some federal capital dollars, and the next motion that we deal with will speak to the advocacy of that. But the bigger issue, and Madam Chair, you were at the same meeting along with myself, Mayor Jaworski, and Mayor McGarry. We know that there has been a lack of response from the province in terms of the request for an emergency meeting by the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus to deal with the issues of homelessness and as well as addictions and mental health. And yet, the issues that we're dealing with today in our community are not unique to Waterloo Region. In fact, they're being faced by every major urban center across the province. And clearly, we're going to, both here locally and collectively, up our game in terms of getting our colleagues to the table. So, the good news is that, at least from a municipal point of view, we have many partners, including the Chambers of Commerce, the Downtown BIAs, the Ontario Chiefs of Police, the Canadian Mental Health, and others that are joining the call for the need to see this urgently addressed. So I'm pleased to support this, and I'm hoping that it will once again be supported unanimously.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark, I'm assuming that you'd be happily second this as Councillor Brvanovich moved it, and please feel free to make your comments.
Thanks. And yes, absolutely happy to second it. I have heard considerable support for the motions we're considering tonight, as I'm sure most of us have, but I've also heard some trepidation from people who are concerned that we might be stepping away from our commitment to housing first principles. And I think we need to be clear that the direction we're considering taking tonight isn't a repudiation of that commitment, which was officially adopted by the region several years ago when the council of the time decided that our focus needed to be not on managing homelessness, but on ending it. And it's not to be interpreted as suggesting that our housing first approach hasn't been successful. It has been very successful, as we've seen dozens, if not hundreds of people who are chronically homeless becoming permanently housed through this approach each year. The direction we're taking tonight needs to be understood as an acknowledgement and a response to the fact that our homelessness situation here, as elsewhere, as Councillor Brvanovich has noted, has changed. It's been driven to crisis levels by a combination of decreasing availability of affordable housing and increases in addictions and mental illness. So despite our housing successes, we simply haven't been able to keep up with the numbers of new people entering into a state of homelessness. We just don't have the resources. The sheltering and short-term housing options that are hopefully approved today are explicitly interim because we know that they're not the solutions to homelessness. Someone staying in a shelter is still homeless. Someone living in an encampment is still homeless. In the past couple of years, we've added almost 1,000 new affordable housing units. That's a 900% increase over the average of many prior years. And many of those units are supportive housing. We know that permanent supportive housing is the solution that we need to continue to pursue and where we need to continue to direct our investments. The incoming council will have the opportunity to build a new homelessness master plan, and I won't be here, but I'll urge them to stay that housing first course.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'm going to take the chair's prerogative and just quickly comment that I would totally agree with what you said. I think we are a housing first community, and it has been proven to be, I think, sort of the best practice. However, I'm very excited about the components of the motion that we are now going to be dealing with, because I think the master plan is absolutely essential, as well as looking at all of the points along the housing continuum, whether it's shelter, interim housing, supportive housing, rent subsidies, that there are many places where we can intervene and make a significant difference to the system and also to those individuals. So, colleagues, the summary of recommendations, the first one is direct staff to develop a homelessness master plan detailing strategies and resources necessary to end homelessness in the region of Waterloo. The second clause is that the regional municipality of Waterloo authorize staff to prioritize and implement interim housing solutions to support those experiencing homelessness in the region of Waterloo. Expansion of transitional housing programs, including Indigenous-focused and led site, expansion of home-based support program, expansion of emergency shelter program, and permit managed hybrid shelter outdoor model. So it's been moved by Councillor Brvanovich, seconded by Councillor Clark. I would ask you to use your icons to vote. That is carried unanimously, colleagues. Thank you for that. Other matters under the Committee of the Whole is interim housing solutions for regional residents experiencing homelessness. I'd call on Peter, Commissioner of Community Services, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to members of Council, last week I, on behalf of regional staff and all of those who we had the privilege of connecting with, both in a somewhat formal process to inform the report that came to the committee last week, and also what we've learned in having conversations with people across this community for much longer than I have been here at the region, was an attempt to put our best foot forward under a very challenging circumstance. It was a plan that was rooted in 2 recommendations that the chair has just outlined. And over the past week, at a regional staff level, we have worked with our colleagues in finance to come back to you with some more specific wording, specifically related to the source of funding and the delegation of authority for us to get on with this work in earnest. And at this point, I would like to take the opportunity to ask my colleague, Commissioner Dyer, to just walk through again one more time the financial investments that are required and that we are proposing to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, I have a very, very brief slide deck to walk you through. In 3 slides, I'm going to touch on costs, I'm going to touch on funding, and perhaps not surprisingly, I'm going to say a little bit about the provincial-municipal funding relationship, and then just a quick walkthrough of the recommendations. So, from a costing perspective, the table before you is one I believe was taken right out of the report. We've estimated at this point the annualized operating costs associated with the proposed services to be in the range of $10 million. That would translate into about $3.5 million for the last 4 months of this year. Bear with me for 1 second. These costs were put together largely using existing service contracts that we have and costs that we're incurring in other areas as well to try to come up with the best estimate that we could from an operational perspective. I would say 2 things about the numbers on this slide. One is that they don't include capital costs. Those are actually impossible for us at the moment to estimate. That will come out of, over the next little while as we implement the recommendations that have been approved by Council tonight. That implementation will help determine the need for capital costs, and we'll certainly be reporting back to Council on an as-required basis with respect to those costs. The other thing that we'll be looking at over the course of the fall is the need for additional resources from an administration and oversight perspective. But overall, this gives you some indication of what the order of magnitude is from an operating cost perspective. If we go to the next slide, from the funding side, for 2022, staff are recommending that any costs incurred with respect to the implementation of these recommendations would be funded through existing capacity within the 2022 Equity and Inclusion budget, which is a $10 million allocation, funded $7.5 million from the levy and $2.5 million from the tax stabilization reserve. And to the extent that any additional costs are needed, we would also then look to the tax stabilization reserve as well. And obviously we'll report back to Council at the end of the year with respect to the split between those 2 the funding sources. Of greater concern from a financial perspective, obviously, is 2023. The first recommendation that we'll look at in just a minute is to advocate for additional homelessness funding. We're particularly concerned about the expiry of the province's Social Services Relief Fund. That funding expires at the end of this year. And going into 2023, we have about a $6.5 million funding shortfall with respect to existing homelessness programs. And so in the absence of any additional funding, the shortfall, along with the incremental costs associated with the interim plan, would be in the range of $17 million. So that is certainly top of mind for us as we look at our 2023 budget projections. And I would just note that the $10 million annualized operating cost is over and above what we had estimated back in June. You'll recall that staff had presented a report with some preliminary estimates of the 2023 budget in the range of a 10% tax increase for regional services. That did not include the provisions that are included in the report today for the interim shelter. So it creates certainly a very challenging budget for us as we get deeper into that into the 2023 budget process. And we hope to provide an update for council at the September meeting on the 21st with respect to the state of the 2023 budget. And then on the next slide, Madam Chair, just some comments that are pretty much taken right from the report. And again, we've had this conversation many times, and we've reiterated our concerns about the capacity of the property tax levy to fund the expectations that are out there in the community of the region is becoming a more significant challenge. We've talked before about the extent of programs that have provincial-wide objectives, provincial-wide social programs with an income redistribution and a social equity purpose that are funded from the tax base. And the region's capacity to fund these types of programs with revenues that consist of property taxes and user fees, essentially a 150-year-old funding model for municipalities, is becoming harder and harder every year. And to a great extent, this is a problem within Ontario because these programs are funded in a very different manner in other provinces. So with that, Madam Chair, just a quick run through of the recommendations. There are 4 of them in the report. If we move to the next slide, the first is with respect to advocacy to the federal and provincial governments. The second is to amend the 2022 operating budget by $3.4 million, again, funded from a combination of the equity fund and the tax stabilization reserve. And if we move to the next slide, the third is what we would refer to as a delegation recommendation, and this is to allow the CAO and my colleague, the Commissioner of Community Services, to do all things necessary in order to bring effect to the recommendations that have been adopted today. And as we discussed earlier, signaling Council's intent to recover from future development charges any capital costs and of course capital costs incurred, and of course that will be a future decision for the subsequent Council. I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you very much. And colleagues, one of the reasons this is necessary is because tomorrow at 2 o'clock we become lame duck, and we need to give this delegation of authority and expenditure in order to allow this process to go forward. Councillor Galloway.
Madam Chair, are you looking, is this moved already, or?
No, would you like to move it?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Erb. Councillor Galloway, do you want to speak to it?
I certainly do, Madam Chair. I'm pretty angry about this. And I'm not angry that we need to do this, because we absolutely do need to do this. But what I'm angry about is that the province is not meeting their obligations. And here we go again, backstopping the province. And Mr. Dyer, I think in somewhat gentle tones, warned us of what is really going on here. And it's the use of property taxes, which is the most regressive form of taxation that we know of. It's not based on the ability to pay. These kinds of services and programs have to be funded from consumption taxes and from income taxes. And we don't have any of those. We don't have any consumption taxes or income taxes. Those are the purview of the provincial and federal government. And, you know, we keep eating away at property taxes or increasing property taxes. The burden that this is going to create in the upcoming budget discussions cannot be underestimated. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars. We're talking almost 3% on the property tax levy. just for this program alone, if there was to be no other source of funding that was made available for 2023. I mean, thankfully, staff have been able to cobble together some kind of a solution for 2022, but that's not going to be available in 2023. Consumption taxes, the province, it has income taxes and sales taxes. This is where this needs to come from. You know, we've backstopped the province in the past on childcare. We've backstopped them on discretionary benefits, and now we're getting into the habit of backstopping them again on housing and homelessness. And we're doing the right thing. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, because we have to. We have to do this for our community. We have to do this for the citizens that need this level of service. But this is not right in terms of where the money is coming from. And I know that our motions talk about advocacy to the province and the federal government for more money, and maybe that will be forthcoming. I don't know. This provincial government seems to be more interested in giving back license plate fees and reducing highway tolls and a lot of car-centric kinds of initiatives that seem to get funding, and these kinds of initiatives don't necessarily get them. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe something will come forward in the near future as a province-wide initiative from the provincial government. But I won't be here for the 2023 budget, at least the final part of the budget. But having been through quite a number of them over the past few years, this one is, this alone is going to be a monumental problem when it comes to the budget for property taxes. So I'm happy to move this, Madam Chair, because as I said, I believe this is something we absolutely need to do, given the absence of other funding from the other levels of government that are really responsible for housing. We need to do this, but I certainly do want to express my concern over how this is happening, and how property taxes, which is not based on ability to pay, like income taxes and sales taxes are based on ability to pay. Property taxes are not, as we know. That this is the wrong form of revenue for these kinds of problems. We're a good service provider. We can deal with these problems given enough resourcing, but the resourcing should be coming from other sources. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Before I go to Councillor Fox and Councillor Erb, did you want to make comments as the seconder of the motion?
Thank you. Yes, I do. And I too, this is something we have no choice to do. To me, it feels like the upper levels of government have been missing in action, not hearing or understanding this humanitarian crisis that so many urban centers across Ontario are experiencing, and not being prepared to come to the table and assume their responsibility rather than having the municipalities pick it up. I just did some quick math in the last 2 or 3 days, and like many people were maybe happy to get their rebates on their license plates, but I didn't see overwhelming support for it, and many people were wondering what else could be done with that money. The annual revenue to the province with license plate stickers in 1 year is $1.1 billion. The rebate that came back to people in the region of Waterloo in a fiscal year will be $45 million. Can you imagine what we could have done if that $45 million would have been allocated some other way, or the sticker fund wouldn't have been? And so I just think I wish our local provincial members of parliament who are part of the government, our ears are open and listening, and that we can continue the advocacy but we can't do this alone. As Councillor Galloway said, this alone, plus the increase in the police budget that we're going to have to deal with in 2023, is just going to make for a monumental task in taxes for the residents for 2023. So I support it, but please, province and feds, show some heart and help us out.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. Councillor Foxton. I see no other speakers. You don't want to, okay, so we can call the question. I would just like to reiterate something that Councillor Clark said, and Councillor Galloway touched on it, and that these are interim steps. These are temporary steps. And I go back to when we did fill in for discretionary benefits and childcare, and when the context changed or the funding changed, we were seen as a level of government that was withdrawing those supports. So that's my fear. Everybody agrees this is a very necessary expenditure. This is a creative solution that staff has come up with. I think council unanimously supports it, but I have to say that it will make next year's budget very challenging. So colleagues, it's been...
Recorded vote, please.
Okay, a recorded vote has been requested.
Chair Redmond.
In favor.
Councillor Rubanovic.
In favor.
Councillor Jaworski.
In favor.
Councillor Clark.
In favor.
Councillor Lorenz.
In favor.
Councillor Jowett.
In favor?
Councillor Erb.
In favor.
Councillor Nowak.
In favor.
Councillor McGarry.
In favor.
Councillor Harris.
In favor.
Councillor Shantz.
In favor.
Councillor Strickland. Councillor Foxton.
In favor.
Councillor Galloway.
In favor.
And Councillor Armstrong.
In favor.
It's carried.
Thank you, colleagues. That is carried. I'd now entertain a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and Council to resume. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Lorenz, seconded by Councillor McGarry. Please use your icons to vote. Councillor Clark, are you voting with your hand, or do you have a question? Or you're voting with your hand? Okay. Can you give me a high five, are you? So colleagues, that was carried. I would now entertain a motion to adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Erb. Please use your icons to vote. That is carried, colleagues. I have no unfinished business. I'll now entertain a motion to go into closed session. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Please use your icons to vote. So colleagues, staff will need about 5 minutes to pause the webcast and clear the Zoom room. So please stay tuned, but if you want to turn your cameras off, you have 5 minutes. Van? Colleagues, I need a motion to reconvene in open session. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Please use your icons to vote. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you. Under other business, we have a motion from closed earlier this evening. Moved by Councillor Clark. Seconded by Councillor Shantz. Okay. We're going to put it up on the screen, but we just came out of close, so if you want to vote, that's fine. So this motion is that the Regional and Municipality of Waterloo approve a tentative memorandum of settlement for regions outside workers represented by CUPE Local 1656 for the period of January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024. Councillor Ravanovich.
Yeah, just, I guess, for the public record, I mean, what are the main details of the settlement?
Who would like to speak to that?
I can speak to that through you, Madam Chair. The details to be added in for this piece. That's what we're looking to do. So the main items are annual increases of 2.1% in each year of the agreement.
Councillor Ravanovich?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. And it appears most of us have voted, if not all of us. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you very much. I now need a motion to enact the bylaws for second and third reading. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. That is carried, colleagues. Thank you. Colleagues, now is your favorite part of the meeting. I need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Verbanovich. Please use your icons to vote. Thank you, colleagues. That is carried. Everybody have a wonderful evening.
Happy Lame Duck Eve.
Good luck, everybody.
I think